everyone, Mr. DVB here, and in today's video I'm going to be reviewing a new Netflix series. This is something that I rarely do on this channel, is review TV shows, because as I've said in the past, I'm not the biggest TV show person. A lot of the time shows for me have a lot of filler episodes or they go on for too long. The big example of both of those things that I can think of is The Walking Dead. I used to love that show when I was younger, and I think I stopped watching it around season 7 because it just got so repetitive. It was always characters walking in the forest, and I realized I'm basically just watching this show to find out which character dies at the end of the season. So I just stopped caring, stopped watching that show, I think season 7, episode 2, and now they're like getting ready for the 11th season, right? Like show really was boring to me, and it stayed past its welcome. And then there's other shows like Game of Thrones, where, you know, season 8 was coming out, and I've heard about the show for years, so I decided I would sit down and binge watch all 7 seasons in anticipation for 8. I did that. I was like, wow, this is a great show. And then season 8 comes out, and it absolutely sucks, and I felt like I just wasted the last month of my life. So that's why I'm not a big TV show person. On the other hand, I like miniseries, because miniseries, it's one season, 9 or 10 episodes or whatever, and you're done. So some of the best miniseries I can name off the top of my head, I love Chernobyl. That was a fantastic series, came out last year, I believe. Another great series is Band of Brothers, one of the best war series slash movies, I guess you could call it, in existence, in my opinion. It would probably be my second one, right behind Saving Private Ryan. Like, it's just a freaking great, because sometimes people refer to them as movies, but it's just a great series. And, you know, so recently I watched Bly Manor, as it obviously just came out, but before watching that, I watched The Haunting of Hill House, because I had not seen Hill House. I had heard about it for a couple of years. I knew it was directed by Mike Flanagan, who has made some really damn good horror films in the past few years. I think Dr. Sleep was great, especially the first three quarters of that movie, I think was great. And I also really like Hush, which was like a very, very low budget movie, I think $1 million, but it was a good thriller. Like, it was a movie that was very edge of your seat, suspenseful. So I think he's a good director. I think he's underrated. And Hill House I loved. I thought it was fantastic. There's gonna be a lot of comparisons between the two series throughout this video, so that's why I'm giving my quick thoughts on it. But yeah, so Hill House, I love the characters. I think that's what worked best about the show for me, was the family drama. And then on the side, you also had this really great atmospheric, suspenseful horror, because, well, I'm not somebody who hates jump scares as much as a lot of people do. Especially when they're done effectively, they're done effectively. This show had one particularly great jump scare that I can think of. But I almost think what's scarier or creepier is when you see things in the back lurking, right? Because the idea of ghosts, it's more creepy when they're there watching you and you don't always see them. And this show, Hill House, did that extremely well. You'd have a bunch of things in the background, and I didn't even notice all of them. I had to go on my phone to find them. I think I only noticed about 3 without online help. So that's just something that's eerie, you know, seeing that stuff in the background. Whereas jump scares, it's like, kind of goes against the idea of a ghost, in my opinion. But anyways, those are my brief thoughts on Hill House. I just wanted to get that out of the way because I am going to be comparing these two shows, and we're already like 3 minutes into this review. Bly Manor, it's about this nanny, or I think they call her an au pair, who goes to take care of these 2 kids who recently lost their parents. Living with them is the cleaning lady, the cook. The cook doesn't live with them, same with the gardener, but they take care of these kids as well. And it's basically just about them taking care of them, but some weird things happening on the side, and there's some mystery, some romance, some scares. This series is not being as well received as Hill House right off the bat. Like, it's definitely, in my opinion, not as good as a show as well. Like, I definitely preferred Hill House. I don't think this is a bad show. I still think it was very good. It's just very different from Hill House. Hill House was a lot more of a family drama with really good horror elements. This show is more of, and it's been said many times by a lot of people, but it's more of a dark romance. It honestly felt like some like early 90s Tim Burton film, just without the over-the-top gothic architecture. That's kind of how I felt about this show, because a lot of it has to deal with just romances between different characters and death and etc. And I really liked this season. I think the biggest complaint that it's been getting from a lot of fans is that it's not as scary as the first season was. And again, this is more of an anthology series, because on Netflix, they're 2 completely separate shows. It's not like they're under the same banner, but they're both, you know, The Haunting of, and then enter title here. So I kind of consider them like an anthology. But yeah, with this show, it's definitely not as scary. Like, I don't even recall there really being, there's like maybe like 1 or 2 jump scares, but they're kind of predictable ones. It's not like the one in the car in Hill House where that just came out of completely nowhere. The ones here they were more predictable, but just overall, the show wasn't as scary. Another thing too for me was that I just didn't care for the characters as much. I didn't think any of the characters were bad. I still liked a lot of them. I think the performances were great, especially from the lead. There's this other character named Hannah, who I thought the actress who played her was great. So I liked the characters, and I thought the performances were great, but I didn't connect to them. I didn't feel like the characters as well had that connection that was present in the first series. So I just found myself not really caring for them as much. And then on top of that, I think this is a slower series. I think the first season for me, episode 2 was where it hooked me, and I was just fully into it. I love the formula of that first season where you have them as kids living in the manor, and you're seeing what haunted them then, and then you have them as adults, and what things carried over from that, and the troubles they're dealing with now. Like, for example, Luke in that show was a heroin addict, and I just love that element of the show, kind of cutting between the two timelines seamlessly, and it just really made you understand those characters on a deeper level. This season doesn't really do that as much. There is a couple episodes where it's certainly dedicated to certain characters, but a lot of the time it'll just be dedicated to them in the certain time, in the current timeline, I meant to say, not necessarily things that happened with them in the past. That only happens for like one character that I can really think of, which is the main one. We kind of understand the storyline between them and why they see this like weird reflection in mirrors of this guy wearing glasses. And I actually called the twist with that pretty much immediately. I won't spoil it, but it was something that I found a little bit predictable, but it doesn't bother me, right? Like, still seeing it all play out in the flashbacks was great. But yeah, it was definitely a different show, like a far different show from the original one. And I think that's the biggest complaint for people, is it's just not very scary. For me, the thing that kind of hurt it the most was just not really caring about the characters as much, and just finding it generally slower and not as well told. Because, like I said, the first season, about 2 episodes in, I was hooked. This one, I think it was probably around episode 5 or 6 that things really started to hook me in. The rest, like the previous episodes, were kind of just the same. It was, characters would be walking around the house, the kids would be acting strange, especially the boy, and then the episode would end. And maybe there'd be like some kind of small revelation towards the end of the episode. Episode 5 is where things, there's a really big twist in that episode, and things are starting to click, and you're starting to get more invested in what's going on. And that's also when the character relationships start getting a lot better. There's 2 characters in particular, the cook and the character Hannah, who I really liked their discussions, their conversations, and the relationship. So that's something that this season does do well, is eventually it starts, giving us really good connections with those characters. But yeah, otherwise, just not as good of a season in my opinion. I am really hoping they do a third one, and I'm sure they will. I know that Mike Flanagan is working on a different show first, so we might not see a third Hill House or whatever right away. I'm hoping they make one, and I'm hoping it's not a long wait. I'm hoping it's, another 2-year wait. But we'll see where things go. Another thing I will say about this series, it's also not directed by Mike Flanagan. He only directed the first episode, whereas with the first season, he directed all 10 of them. Here, he wrote the series, but he only directed one of the episodes, which was the first one. I don't think that's something that really affects the show in the long run. I never felt like, oh, this doesn't at all feel like a Mike Flanagan show, because it still has that really nice look to it, right? It looks like a full-budget movie with the way it looks. It's very sharp. I love the camera angles and that kind of stuff. I don't think it's as well shot as season 1, I will say that. Again, it's not something that the vast majority of audiences are going to pick up on, but with the first season, there was one episode in particular, episode 6, The Two Storms, where the whole episode was basically designed to look like one long shot, and there was actually, I think, one whole 18-minute uninterrupted shot, and that was such a great tool in that one episode. Like, I thought that was fantastic, and that's my favorite episode of the first season. Here, there's nothing like that really stuck out to me as far as being really unique from the way it was shot. There was some cool set design, I guess you could say, where characters would be in rooms, and something would happen with the room. I'm not going to say what, but it was kind of cool. The part of this season that worked best for me personally was the romance stuff. Not necessarily the main romance that ends up becoming kind of the whole point of the series, but there is one that kind of occurs earlier on. Again, I can't really get into it with spoilers or anything like that, but just the direction they take with it, it does have some kind of twist in there that was probably the most terrifying part of the season for me. And it's not something that's, jump scary or anything like that. It's just the thought of it I thought was really eerie and just horrible to think about. So that was definitely the strong point of this season for me. Again, it felt like some kind of a Shakespeare play. Like, it felt like Romeo and Juliet, and it felt like Tim Burton to me, right? Like, it just kind of felt like a mixture of those things, and I like that about it. I think it was a very well done season. It was very creative. I just think if it had a little bit stronger moments with its characters, and I think if in general it had just more scares or more creepy things lurking in the background, I think it would have been a stronger season. So my rating for this one would be an 8 out of 10. I still really liked it. I do think it has a better conclusion than Hill House did, because I loved Hill House all the way through. I thought the last episode, well, I don't mind the direction it went. I thought the whole Red Room twist payoff wasn't as big as I was expecting it to be, but I still like the direction that final episode took, and where the characters end up I thought was great and everything. It was emotionally satisfying, but I don't know, I just found the writing in that final episode was kind of weaker than the previous ones. Bly Manor, I think the last episode is possibly the best. I think it wraps up things very, very well. It is a more emotional conclusion, I guess you could say. It's not necessarily like a super happy ending like season 1 had for the most part, even though season 1 did have some, like, you know, level of emotion to it with the ending. This season is much more depressing, I guess you could say, but still all handled very, very well. Going into the season, I was worried about the characters, because a lot of the actors from season 1 were carrying over. And I didn't know if I liked the idea of that, because I had just finished watching the first season, right? So for me to just jump onto this new show, where you're basically having, you know, the brother and sister Nell and Luke from the previous show being two completely different characters now who aren't related, and then meanwhile you have Henry Thomas playing a different character, not playing their dad. It was just a lot of things like that where I was like, oh, I'm kind of worried about how this is going to turn out, but it did not bother me once. They felt like completely different characters. Their performances were vastly different, so didn't bother me. They do reuse a lot of the music from Hill House. Like, if you the one score, Go Tomorrow, which is probably the best score in Hill House in my opinion, is used in this series, and I wasn't a fan of that personally, because I felt like that should have been Hill House's music, and this series should have had its own. Because, like, Go Tomorrow is, like, kind of like the emotional score or whatever, the one that you connect with the most with Hill House. I feel like they shouldn't have used that here, because I try using it in the scenes here where you're supposed to connect to what's going on, and I just felt like, they're just using the Hill House music. This season did have its own score that I really, really like, but wasn't used as often as I thought it would have been. Anyways, kind of a minor thing. I don't even remember if I rated this season. I think I said it was an 8 out of 10, yes. So 8 out of 10. The first season for me would be like a 9.5, which I know is a very high rating. Again, I don't watch TV shows very often, and I thought that first season was very effective. So there you go, The Haunting of Bly Manor. I do recommend you guys watch it. I recommend watching Hill House as well. It doesn't matter which one you watch first. It's not like the series are connected in any way, shape, or form. Two completely separate stories. Does not matter which one you watch first. But yeah, I enjoyed the season overall, and that's really all I have to say. So thank you guys for watching this video. Again, I apologize for the crappy camera, and I will see you guys next time, which will probably be my next PlayStation video. So I'll see you then.